My dear friends, greetings. What do a crocodile pit and the crater of an active volcano have in common? Well, both are less dangerous than a throne. And yeah, right, it's not all about becoming a king, it's about staying one. Between the assassins, the plots, the wars, the life expectancy is not great. Yes, today we're back for a parade of absurd and unusual deaths. And I promise you, there will not only be crowned heads, there will also be soldiers in the lot. So, if you're ready, let's go. We're going to do something festive. And we start with Ptolemy XIII, the young Greek king who ruled Egypt in peace, at least until Rome and all its political gang got involved. In 48 BCE, Ptolemy is a teenager of about 13 years old who already rules Egypt. But beware, his sister Cleopatra remains a rival. His ministers have a lot of influence, and besides, he remains a submissive vassal to Rome. Moreover, he even has as a protector a famous Roman general, Pompey. But everything changes when Julius Caesar crushes his enemies at the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BCE. Pompey, his rival, retreats to Egypt to rebuild his forces. But it doesn't go at all as planned. Despite his youth, Ptolemy XIII is particularly daring and even a little drunk. When Pompey disembarked in Alexandria, Ptolemy had him executed on the spot. He hopes thus to gain Caesar's respect and to maintain a certain independence for his Egyptian kingdom. When Julius Caesar arrives a few days later, he delivers Pompey's head on a pike. All is well. It is the end of the Civil War. In short, we've all received one day or another a gift that was a little embarrassing or failed. But here, frankly, it's the best, because yes, Pompey was temporarily Caesar's rival, but for a long time they ruled Rome together. They were close, and Pompey had even married Julius Caesar's daughter, Julia. And most importantly, worse than all that, here we have a ward who killed his guardian, an Egyptian vassal who killed a Roman leader. Caesar therefore lets his anger explode. He subdues the whole Nile Valley, reorganizes the administration. In short, he makes the little Greek king understand that he made a blunder, and that the only boss is Rome. Cleopatra, Ptolemy's sister, seizes her chance. She gets closer to Caesar and claims her brother's throne. Caesar supports her then. Was he seduced by her? Or on the contrary, did he imagine that a woman is easier to manipulate? In any case, Ptolemy is still there, and he is not very excited about being dethroned. So he besieges Caesar's residence, which is blocked with only 3,000 men against an entire army. But the dictator is cunning and manages to capture Ptolemy and set fire to all his fleet. After 6 months of fight in the city, it is a Roman legion arrived from Syria which releases Caesar and crushes the Ptolemaic army. By chance, Ptolemy XIII manages to escape. Yeah, until he falls into the waters of the Nile. He's wearing heavy armor that drags him down, and he drowns. A brutal end for a teenager who only wanted his country to keep its head above water. Our grand prize of the day goes to Alexis V Ducas, nicknamed Murzuphle. He lasted barely 2 months on the throne of Constantinople before he died a really crappy death. But first, a little background. In 1203, Jerusalem was controlled by Muslim troops. The Pope then mobilizes a new crusade. But without ships, some decide to borrow the fleet of Venice. Bad luck. The Venetians are expensive, and in order to get paid, they will turn the crusade to their advantage, even if it means looting Zara, a Christian city. But the worst thing is that, on the spot, they meet a certain Alexis, a Byzantine prince in exile. The king has empty hands, but he makes them a promise. If they escort him to Constantinople, he will overthrow his uncle, Alexis III, and shower them with gold, reinforcements, and supplies. Basically, he did the trick of the Nigerian prince who swindles you by email and tells you that he will give you millions if you lend him $1,000. The Crusaders are okay with it, and they besiege Constantinople. Alexis III is exiled, and his nephew becomes Alexis IV. And now he has to pay his debt, even if his coffers are empty. And this is news that nobody likes. We have already suffered from war. Now a foreign army is peacefully occupying the country, and on top of that, we have to pay. But in the face of all this discontent, a mysterious adventurer appears, a certain Alexis Ducas. Even if his origins are unclear, he does not come from nowhere. He belongs to the very high Byzantine aristocracy. Ducas is so successful at stirring up anger and division that he ends up dethroning Alexis IV. From now on, he is the only emperor of Constantinople. He closed the gates of the city, refused to pay anything to the Crusaders, and moreover ordered them to leave, not hesitating to attack their troops himself. In short, a hero of the people who thinks he is the Robin Hood of the Middle East. He executes Alexis IV and takes the title of Alexis V Murzuphle. And for those who wonder, Murzuphle simply means big eyebrows. Except that it is a mistake. The Crusaders didn't do all this for nothing. They defeated Murzuphle, and in April 1204, they took the city. But Murzuphle still has a hope. He flees and goes to join Alexis III, the one that Alexis IV had overthrown. With this former common enemy and the challenge to push the Crusaders back to the sea, the two men are made to get along. And besides, the former emperor even takes Murzuphle as son-in-law by giving him the hand of his daughter Eudoxie Angelina. And bang! We do not know why, probably a question of rivalry, but Alexis III changes his mind overnight. He makes Murzuphle gouge his eyes out, and he abandons him in the Pampa. One day, the Crusaders come upon him and give him a beating. After a trial for treason, he is taken to the very top of the very high column of Theodosius. And from there, he is pushed so that he goes to burst on the ground. Quite a symbol for this ambitious man who lasted barely 2 months on the throne. Yeah, you shouldn't have been so quick to rise to the top of the state. As they say, pride comes before a fall. Our next victim, and probably one of the bravest kings of Scotland, who grew up and ruled in a deadly environment and always triumphed. Still, it didn't stop him from going up in smoke in the end. James II was still very young when he became King of Scotland in 1437, and it is not a piece of cake. His father is murdered, the kingdom is so divided that he's going to be carried from one castle to another, each time hostage of a new political faction. Fortunately, one woman saves his life. It is his mother, Queen Joan. A radical woman, she decides to have all of James's cousins executed in order to clean house. It must be said that at the time the whole country is on fire. The worst happens in 1440. The nobles Livingston and Crichton, in conflict with the young Earl William Douglas VI, invite him to settle the matter at a banquet at the king's house in Edinburgh Castle. James is delighted to be able to settle his quarrel, except that in the middle of the dinner, Douglas is served a sign of death. A sliced black bull's head. Poor William is torn to pieces, and the young king protests, but he can't do anything. Yes, it's pretty gritty, and the Black Dinner may have inspired Game of Thrones. In any case, with so much violence and anarchy, it's hard to see how James II will rule. Well, as you can see, he does. Really king in 1449, he must gradually impose himself against the Douglases. Yes, the same ones as before who actually control Scotland. So in 1452, he too invites William Douglas, the eighth of the name, to dinner. He accuses him of conspiracy, gets heated, and stabs him to death. Right after him, his courtiers attacked the corpse. Logically, a new war broke out, but James won it in 1455 at the Battle of Arkenholm. He drives the Douglases back to England and seizes all their goods and their vast lands. He reunites the kingdom, defeats the nobility, and imposes his power and style. Better than that, facing the English threat, he reforms the army and develops a state-of-the-art artillery, determined to attack all the fortresses on the Anglo-Scottish border. From then on, nothing could stop him. He is going to attack the English, and his power will know no limits. In 1460, he besieges Roxburgh. It's so easy that James wants to parade in front of his wife, Marie d'Egmont. To impress his wife and terrify the English, he fires a salvo of artillery. But there, bang! One of the cannons, not as reliable as expected, exploded, and James II was right next to it. He was literally pulverized in the air. The worst thing is that it leaves a great void behind him. He has only one son, a young one, James III, who gets entangled in the same factional wars as before. So, back to square one. But smile a little, Scotland is not lost. And besides, much later, after the death of Elizabeth I, it was Scotsmen who united the kingdoms of England, Scotland, and even Ireland. Charles I thus becomes king in 1625, determined to turn the tables. Except that the English Parliament refuses to support him and therefore votes no funding. So, it's blocked. Except that in 1629, Charles is fed up. He decides to govern alone, which is completely illegal. But never mind. The problem is that he makes his position worse with 3 decisions. First, he refuses to support the German Protestants during the 30 Years' War. Then he marries Henriette Marie, a French Catholic princess. And finally, the Archbishop of Canterbury, William Laud, leads a reformation. Apparently, Anglican Protestantism will move closer to Catholicism. Of course, the Protestant population ends up seeing red against this king without government. The revolt broke out in Scotland in 1637 and spread to Ireland in 1641. Charles has to raise an army, except that after 11 years of muzzling him, the parliamentarians are not likely to vote him a military budget. They are even asking to revise the constitution so that they can manage the administration, the army, and the justice system. In short, the whole kingdom. In 1642, Charles tried a coup de force, but London rose up. He had to flee to Oxford. It is civil war. Oliver Cromwell raises the New Model Army, a powerful military force at the service of Parliament, which crushes Charles's troops every time. He captures him once, and again after he escapes. But even from his cell, Charles's power remains great. The parliamentarians are divided, and he still has support here and there in the kingdoms, especially since he promises to return as a good Protestant. Cromwell, at the head of the army, has a hard time controlling the whole of the British Isles. Politics take time, and a crowned king is not so easy to get rid of. Well, except that there is a deal to be king. It's that one must respect the law. And on that, Charles, he's got some bad habits. The most active religious groups had an amazing idea at the time. What if we put the king on trial? After all, he ignored the laws of the realm, rejected negotiation with Parliament, and refused his defeat, which was nevertheless a very clear message from God. Of course, the moderate parliamentarians refused, but the fanatics excluded them with the support of the army. Charles I was then tried, sentenced to death, and beheaded on January 30th, 1649. You could say that he liked to play the strong man, except that he didn't have the shoulders to match. Normally, the American Civil War is not very funny. In 4 years of conflict, 800,000 people died, and yet there are 2 officers. I couldn't help but laugh when I discovered their story. The first is Thomas Jackson, a veteran of the Mexican-American War. He taught at the Virginia Military Academy and joined the Confederate Army. Promoted to general, he valiantly defends Richmond, the Southern capital. He is nicknamed Stonewall. He has the full confidence of the Confederate General-in-Chief, Robert Lee, and participates in the Battle of Fredericksburg in December 1862. Then in the assault on Chancellorsville in May 1863. Except that there, he suddenly has complete lack of luck. He leads a nighttime reconnaissance, but when he returns to camp, the sentries think it's an enemy intrusion. They shoot at Jackson, who is hit by a hail of bullets before he can call out his name. Wounded, he was evacuated to a plantation, but his wound became infected and his arm had to be amputated. And all the while, he develops pneumonia that no one notices. So it's only at 39 years old that Jackson dies. It's like you can be a super soldier, but if you have incompetent friends and a doctor, you're all going to die. But there is one who can't use the excuse of an accident. That's John Sedgwick, also a war veteran. And he's not going to have a much more glorious death. Sedgwick is Jackson's clone, but as a Northerner, also a veteran of the American-Mexican War, also a war teacher. But at the West Point Academy, he also faced the Seminole and Cheyenne Indians. So, logically, he too ended up as a general in 1861. He accumulates war wounds, and at the Battle of Antietam, he is even one of the only survivors of a completely decimated unit. But he never stops, and after years of fighting, General-in-Chief Ulysses Grant asks for his help in the Battle of Spotsylvania in May 1864. Here was a guy who was used to war and danger. There's no way he's going to do the dumbest thing on earth. No chance. Except that when John Sedgwick positions his artillery, he refuses to listen to his scouts who have spotted snipers. The genius of the time. He is absolutely convinced he is right, stands up and yells at his men. What? My men are hiding to dodge a few bullets? They couldn't hit an elephant at that distance. Blah, blah, blah. And then, bang, a bullet shatters his skull right at that moment. Well, yeah, John, you should have listened. Still, for a nice ego story, Sedgwick went down in history as the highest-ranking Northerner to have died during the war. Thank you all for watching this video. We've shuffled through a lot of different characters. So don't hesitate to tell me in the comments if you want another episode on this or that period. Thanks to Guilhem from the channel d'Histoire en Histoire for the preparation of this show. You can discover his work in the description. His YouTube channel is great. As usual, like, share, and above all, make sure you don't die too absurdly before the next episode. Bye.